And welcome back to another episode of Soccer Supernova, a state of mind's dedicated football chat show. Today I am beyond delighted to be joined by Jonathan Gould. Let's get right into it. So, a footballing family, a prominent footballing father. Were you always destined to be a footballer?
I don't think in my father's eyes. No, I think early in my life, he set me on an educational pathway. I had the choice of going to grammar school or going to good Danish school with my mates, and I decided to go to grammar school and get a solid education behind me. And then even after my education, I then went and worked in the bank for a couple of years in Bristol and in London. So it wasn't set out that way, but I suppose it's like Butcher's would have been GOULD and Sons, and I suppose as far as football concerned, it's turned out GOULD and Sons as well, because I did follow kind of in his footsteps.
Absolutely. So, growing up, it's not the most glamorous position to be a goalkeeper. So, did your dad have any kind of bearing on that then?
I always wanted to be a centre forward like my dad. I spent most of my time in the back garden pretending I was the centre forwards of the time in the 70s. Had a shirt from every club my father played for, and was generally my dad banging in those goals. He scored 160 in his career. So, that's what I probably dreamt of being, but it wasn't until I hit my sort of 1920s that I realised I was never going to be athletic enough or fast enough to be a outfield player, and that's when I made the change.
So obviously there's a little twang in your accent still.
Yeah,
Your first venture to New Zealand was right at the
yeah.
start of your career. So talk us through how that switch kind of came around.
Yeah, my father was the manager at Wimbledon at the time, and it had obviously been 1988 and the FA Cup final, and the previous CEO, general manager at Wimbledon was a guy called Colin Stone. He'd moved out to live in New Zealand, and they did an exchange program with a team called Napier City Rovers, and my father thought that was probably a decent start for me, so I went and spent 9 months with another Scot who played for Scotland called Brian McAllister. And spent 9 months in New Zealand with him, where we won the National League, first time a provincial team had done that. And it was actually there that I first sort of came into contact with what being a Celtic supporter was like. So Brian was a massive Celtic supporter. He used to wake up and listen to the World Service over in New Zealand at 3 o'clock in the morning, and he used to sleep under an Irish flag. So it was quite an introduction, really.
Destined to be then. So what
Yeah.
did you learn when you were over there? Because it's a different culture. That obviously you
Yeah.
come from football being the main sport down south, obviously, and then up here as well. But it's a totally different ballgame over there.
Yeah, rugby massive, and they talk about the iconic All Blacks, and that's really how they are. They're revered, and they're such a professional outfit. As you might be aware, they all have to reside in New Zealand, so they're always seen as part of the makeup of the country. They just don't disband everywhere all over the world. That their trade is plied actually on the fields and the rugby fields in New Zealand. So yeah, I've got a huge amount of respect for the All Blacks, and I'm sort of kind of proud to be linked with them in that way.
So you obviously you have a short stint over there. You
Yeah,
you come back over to the UK. What's the dynamic like of working under your father? Obviously, you've done it a few little times, but
yeah.
sense of favouritism, or is it quite the opposite actually?
It probably works the other way around a little bit. I had a number of events. I remember where we were playing Leeds United away, and I kind of tweaked my ankle on the Friday, and I was on the bench, and Stephen Griswich was the number one. Clearly, my father had the eyes that told him that his second choice goalkeeper was injured, and I remember he came up to me on the Monday. And he gave me a little bit of a rock up, to be honest, and basically said, you're putting the team at risk, you're putting my job at risk, and you're probably putting your career at risk when you do things like that. So that was my sort of first rap on the knuckles as a father and son. But generally, he gave me the opportunity because he believed in me, and that was an indictment of the work that he and I had done earlier on in my career, and the adventures that he'd sent me on to probably get to that level and play for him in the Premier League.
Absolutely, and you did. You plied your
Yeah,
trade down at Coventry for the best part of 4 years,
yeah.
initially under your dad, as you say. So, who were your contemporaries at that time? Who could you sound off of at Coventry?
Like I said, Big Steve Grizovic was the goalkeeper. He'd spent 20 years at the highest level, and he was a fabulous mentor to have. I had a goalkeeping two very good goalkeeping coaches, three actually. One was Alan Hodgkinson, who ended up as the Scottish national team coach. Another one was Peter Bonetti, and then I had Jim Blythe as well, another Scot who himself ended up at Celtic later on in his coaching career. So I had a brilliant mentor as a goalkeeper and three absolutely fantastic goalkeeping coaches.
Who were some of your toughest strikers or midfielders or attackers? Anyone you sort of came up
against? Oh well, yeah.
Amy.
My debut, Amy, was my Premier League debut was at home to Liverpool, and I remember I wasn't expecting to play on the Saturday morning, and I had a phone call, and it was my father who said, "Look, you need to get yourself ready for probably the biggest game of your life because Steve's gone down injured." Put the phone down, and I said to Emma, I said, "Oh, you need to." You need to get me a couple of Budweisers. I says, I'm going to end up playing today. So I had a Budweiser before I got to the ground just to chill the nerves, and then went and played against, one of the great Liverpool teams, really, with, John Barnes, Ian Rush, Jamie Redknapp, probably more known. And we ended up winning 5-1, which was a quite incredible debut for a 24-year-old in the Premier League. But then my third game was away at Old Trafford. And that was against, Alex Ferguson's brilliant young Man United team. And I can remember my dad saying to the whole team, if we can keep these guys out for the first 20 minutes, we've got a really good chance of winning this game. And I think it was on 22 and 23 minutes, Ryan Giggs had scored, then Mark Hughes, and then Cantona played Lee Sharp in, and we ended up getting beat 5-0. So when you consider those sorts of players that you were able to play against, it was a great experience.
It's obviously well spoke about your time off at Celtic, and everyone will kind of touch upon that and all the great achievements there. But how big an achievement, is it just, playing in the Premier League at the time when it was, newly initiated really as the Premier League? It was 92, 93 sort of. So you were right in its infancy. Yeah,
right at the start of it. And Coventry at the time, we were a team that, a lot of us had come out of the lower leagues, and there'd been a lot of faith shown in us by, at that time, it was my father, and then later in the next 2 or 3 years, we had Phil Neal and Ron Atkinson and Gordon Strachan as well. So, there was a big change in football. We noticed a big financial change, I think, as players when new players were being brought into the club. Obviously the transfer fees and the salaries and then the expectations of the supporters went up as well. But it was the infancy, and it was a fabulous time to be in there. That 4 years that I was privileged enough to play at that level.
So you've played at that level, under some fantastic managers as well. Yeah. And then you get that move to Bradford, have enough season, and then how do you find yourself being the third choice at Bradford, which you ultimately ended up being?
Yeah, it was a bit strange. I think a lack of maturity on my part as to how to handle when managers don't always rate you in the same way you rate yourself. I think we've all probably been through that. Initially had great success at Bradford and got promotion with them, won at Wembley in the playoffs, and got themselves into the Championship as it is now. And then kind of fell off the rails in respect of my form. Had a couple of nasty facial injuries that probably set me back a little bit, and then didn't kind of recapture that, and it was really weird. I don't really, when you think back now how I landed up Celtic from being third choice, it's quite a remarkable change in fortune.
Did you have rather a fraught relationship perhaps with Chris Cavaro, or was everything kind of...
Yeah, in retrospect, a little bit, but we both, Cammy and I, we're good buddies now, and your careers go in different directions. And when you look back, I didn't really enjoy that time, but I sort of appreciate it as well. I thought he was a great coach in that first year that we got promotion, and then again expectations change, and I think that the biggest thing is when you're a football player, and now I'm on the coaching side of it, is when you're an actual player and a manager doesn't fancy you, it becomes personal.
Yeah.
When you're a coach, it's purely a professional decision when you make those decisions about players, and you don't know that, like I said, until you actually become a coach yourself, that the decisions are made because the manager and the coach, they're trying to survive as much as we are as players, and therefore disappointment occurs.
I was actually going to touch on it later,
Yeah,
during your spell out when Martin O'Neill came into Celtic,
yeah.
but it seems quite a good time. Is there an extra, necessity for mental strength as a goalkeeper when it comes to, perhaps being dropped? Because it is the only position, though, there is always only going to be one goalkeeper playing. So when it is the drop in, is it perhaps a bit tougher?
Yeah, and I absolutely, and I think looking back to my time at Celtic, it's like every single year, there's always going to be speculation. You're at a big club, and there's always going to be mooted that new goalkeepers are going to come in, and that was always the case. I remember Roy Carroll getting mentioned. I remember Mark Bosnich getting. There was loads, and what you got to remember is through that time, I think when Martin was there, I think we already had Dimmy, we had Stewie, I think, was still there at the time. There were good goalkeepers at the football club, and I think when Martin left me out, we actually were unbeaten in the league. And other people remind me of that, and I don't know why. I suppose it's a bit like being pregnant, where when you're pregnant, you tend to lose the memory of the pain, and I clearly have done that with being left out of the team. But looking back, it probably was a little bit harsh. But that again, it wasn't personal. It was what Martin felt the team needed to go on and win the treble, and then go and win the titles after that. So, and like I said, I think I appreciate that more now as a coach than as I did as a player.
Yeah, because it's obviously it's a tough predicament. So, as we segue into that period of time then in your Celtic career, I spoke to Jock Brown not too long ago, actually,
Yeah,
and he touched on being involved in your signing. So,
yeah,
us through that manic move.
yeah. Jock. What happened was I had an agent, and I don't know how well known this is, but I had an agent, and he rang me up, and it was like 8 o'clock in the morning, and I promise you, the day before, I'd rang the manager at Scarborough to see if he would be interested in taking me on a free transfer, and he wasn't. So the next thing I know, my agent rang me up and said, "Oh, Celtic need a goalkeeper. I'm going to put your name in." I thought, fantastic. For some reason, don't know what made me do it. I rang up my dad, and I said, "Have you got any contacts at Celtic?" And he rang Jock, and he said, "Jock, we've heard that you might be looking for a goalkeeper. Would you be interested in Jonathan?" And Jock must have then obviously put the phone down, gone and spoke to Vim, probably spoke to Craig and Murdo, because Craig and Murdo had also had me in the Scottish squad that I was in '93. I think it was the '93 season. I'd been in one of the squads, and they'd done their homework, and literally within 3 hours, we'd agreed terms. Not that was difficult, because it was too big a move to start worrying about money at the time. We'd agreed terms, and I was on the motorway on the way up to Glasgow on the M6. It was remarkable how it all happened. I've actually still got the visitors card from the day I walked into Celtic Park, and it's hanging up in my garage over in New Zealand. I'll never let that go, because that was the reality of the situation I was put in. And then, I obviously met Jock and Vim probably knew nothing about me whatsoever. And then Pete Latchford was the next one I met. So it was very, very surreal.
Yeah, you obviously you touched upon it there. You knew who Murdo McLeod was from your time in the Scotland camp, but what were your first impressions of Vim? Obviously, over the last few days as well, it's actually quite sad news about Vim. But go back to those happier days. You first walk in. Was it an easy sell?
They didn't have to sell anything to me. I think I was a probably harder sell to them. But it was. I think I had two things that really helped me settle in, and the first one was the meeting with Tommy Boyd, who was the club captain, and him taking me round the dressing room and introducing me to all the players that were there, and everybody wishing you well, and so you immediately got a feel of the family that was within the Celtic Football Club. And I think the next one really was Pete Latchford. He was huge for me in those first few months. His experience of having played over 300 games for the club, his belief in me from what he saw in my training and my technical ability, and probably, my determination to make a success of it. And then in the end, I think it was Vim just let me get on with my job, Amy. Never really questioned anything, and that silence in itself was an acceptance that he believed in what I was capable of doing for the football club.
There's perhaps the belief that Vim and Peter Latchford obviously had in you as well. Did that give you the confidence that you could go on and play for Celtic for as long as you certainly did after quite a turbulent career up until now? It's been up and down, and especially after what had just happened at Bradford, it was quite a fall from grace, really.
Yeah, I didn't have any doubt in my technical ability as a goalkeeper ever. I always thought that the work I did and the work that I'd done going back to Steve Ogrizovic was of a high quality. It was, and I think when I came to Celtic, I was probably 29, turned 30, and they say that's when you hit your straps from a maturity, mentally, however you want to see it. That's when goalkeepers are supposed to be in the form of their lives, and that season probably showed that to be true. And then the 3 or 4 years that followed.
Tommy Boyd, obviously, he's walking you around, getting you used to that camp right away.
Yeah.
Did you understand the magnitude of the season that you were really walking into?
I had no idea at all, none, and that probably helped me as well. Even though the pressure came on us pretty quickly, I think we got beaten at Hibs in the opening game of the season. Even though the pressure then, I think my first home game was against Dunfermline, and I don't think that went too well from a team perspective. We knew very quickly the pressure was on as a group, because there were quite a few new names, as you'll know. There was Reggie Blinker, Mark Reaper, there was Henrik Larsson, some guy called Henrik. I know Paul Lambert. He would have known a bit more about it, being as he was from Scotland anyway. And then the Craig Burleys. There was a lot join us, and probably we're coming into something that there was an element of percentage down on what it really meant, but we soon got to understand it.
And that guy Henrik Larsson, just how good was he?
Oh, well, you don't have to. I don't have to tell you how good he was. Everybody knows. Everybody, and I think back to what he used to do on a daily basis in training, his attitude towards everything. He was a tough guy, and he was his principles and his work ethic were second to none. And I think the biggest thing is that you leave Celtic and you go on and you play for Barcelona and Manchester United in the twilight of your career, and you're still very successful. That shows you how good he was.
It's all right for some, isn't it? So it was a tough time, like you say, you were involved in that 2-1 defeat to Dunfermline, already on the back of that defeat to Hibs as well. So just a few months down the line, though, you win the League Cup as it is in November. It's always that early sort of competition. Do you think it was a momentum booster at that time?
I think it was huge, and it's quite a rarity to win a cup competition that early in the season, only in Scotland. But it was I think 7 games, we didn't concede in those 7. You win a semi-final, a final at Ibrox, which was a bit strange in itself as well. And that gave us a belief as a group of players, and probably made us set our standards even higher with each other, because we knew we were capable of it.
Another sort of like milestone in that season, the stopping of the 10 season was obviously the New Year derby.
Yeah.
Changed things psychologically. Obviously, the cup's a bit of a booster, but do you think that was there a shift there?
Yeah, I think that's where you've talked about the pressure earlier and how it starts, and that's where it really did ramp up, because it was so close. And you know, I can see. I've seen it plenty of times on the video, but you see Paul Lambert's ball nestle in the top corner, and the stadium went nuts. I think that was that was a realization then from everybody that we were serious title contenders for the first time in 10 years.
You know, and going into that serious title contenders, you know, it was all in your own destiny and control of your own destiny, and the way you want it. So how hard was it, you know, that last ditch draw against Dunfermline for you as well?
Yeah, do you know what? It didn't feel as if it was in our control. I can remember it yo-yoing plenty of times during the months that led up. I can remember us drawing games at home and not scoring, drawing 0-0, and then I think you know, even that point where you got up to Dunfermline, and I think by then we knew it was in our control. It was a case of when, not if. But there's always that little doubt, and I suppose the goal from Craig Falconbridge off the side of his ear, that was a little bit of doubt creeping in, because we should have won that game. We should have won that game easy. We should have been 2 or 3-0 up by half time.
Absolutely. But how do you get over that? Like you say, it's by the side of his ear even.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of deflation, but it is still in your own hands, and you just move on to St Johnstone. How do you get back?
We cleared the air pretty quickly, because I know we went out on the Tuesday night. We used to go to a Chinese called the Amber Regent, and we had a few drinks, and I think that settled the nerves for the rest of the week's training. You know, we were a tight group on and off the park, as is known, and that was kind of our way of letting off a little bit of steam going into the final week of a very important game. And that sounds strange, but you know, sometimes you need that, and I think that was something we learned as Celtic players, and you know, Rangers players will tell you the same. That every now and then you need a little bit of a blowout, and you need to be you know, a group and find your own space, and we did that.
And does Vim just kind of like allow that sort of space? That
he wouldn't have known, Amy. Okay? He certainly wouldn't have known on that Tuesday. I mean, there was one occasion earlier in the season where we told him that we were going away for the weekend, and he asked. He said, okay. I for some reason, I was always the one that had to go and ask these managers these things. It's really weird, because I wasn't really the ringleader in there. But I went up to him and I said, "Oh, we're going to go and have a couple of days away." It was after a Hibs game, actually, away at Easter Road, and we said, "Yeah, we're going to go and have a couple of days in Ireland." And he went, "Yeah, you have rest. You take your family." And we went, "No, we're just going to go and go out." And he sort of looked at me, and I said, "Yeah, we're going to go and have a few drinks with him." All right. He said, "Okay. You go and relax, have a few drinks." And he probably didn't understand what a few drinks was at the time. And then I remember him saying it. He said, "So you train Monday? You all guys come in and train Monday?" And I went, "Well, it's not really a good idea to come in and train Monday." I said, "Probably have us in Tuesday." And he says, "No, you must come in Monday." And I went, "Okay, well, that's your choice, boss." And I remember us coming in Monday, and he took one look at young Jackie McNamara, as it was at the time, running around the training field, and he just stopped training, and he told us all to go home. He cleared, because I don't think we got off the airplane until 6 on the Monday morning. And we'd had a few, to say the least.
Like you say, it's that determination. What exactly is a few drinks? So you know, it gets to that final game. Obviously, Harold back seals it. Is it sheer joy, or is it a state of relief?
Purely relief, and I think the whole stadium felt. I think when the whistle went, there was 2 or 3 seconds of just quiet, and I remember the referee, he was down in the bottom corner, and he kind of wanted to cry, but it wasn't joy. It literally was, thank goodness for that. Yeah. We've done it. And I think once that initial 2 or 3 seconds passed, as players and supporters, then it was euphoric. But it did take that instant just for it to just sink in at that moment.
Must have, like, obviously, you said you all celebrate it with your families. This time the families actually come, all the kids come on. Yeah. And is that when everything just becomes real?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I look back on some of the footage now, and it's sad for me to say, but the one face I see more than anyone's now is Phil O'Donnell. And yeah, you don't like to bring that sadness up, but that's who I see.
Yeah,
Because he shared that journey with us. He scored a couple of crucial goals. He was he was a wonderful part of our group, and yeah, so that's there's a tint of sadness every time I see some of those highlights reels.
absolutely. And then, everything kind of gets shifted on quite quickly. And aftermath, you're scooted off to Portugal, then
Yeah.
leaves kind of so abruptly. Would you change all of that if you could? Hindsight's a wonderful thing, obviously, but
It just went pear shaped within the space of 3 or 4 days. Because I think if you look back, and you can't always look back, but if you what we built and what Wim had built and our style of play, you look at some of the goals we scored then. And there's somebody that posts a lot of stuff on social media, and you see the goals, but there's some great goals. The movement was fantastic, and when you look back, Vim was at the start of something there, and you wonder if he'd have been given that time, and he could have, having bought someone like Henry Kin, did he have other nuggets, golden nuggets out there that he could have brought to the football club? You just wonder if that little hiatus we had after that, whether we could have been really successful, on the back of that first championship with Vim. And we never got to find out, and that was a shame. It was sad from a footballing perspective, and I remember we were over in Estoril in Portugal, and we had one last. It was like the Last Supper, really, with Vim, and we all stood up in the room and we sang, it was "Stand Up for the Champions," and it was quite an emotional 3 or 4 minutes. And they're the things again. You remember those things. Thinking with Wim and his potential situation. Yeah, it strikes a chord.
absolutely. And then, so that summer, you stopped the 10. You
Yeah,
yourself have averaged a clean sheet every second game.
yeah.
Must have been a fair amount of surprise when you weren't involved in that initial 98 World Cup squad.
Um, yeah, but I kind of had an idea. You had Jim Leighton, who played over 100 games, I think it was. Even though we pipped Rangers, Andy Gorham had been in immense form that season himself, and Neil Sullivan was playing in the Premier League, and I was this sort of kind of at the time a new kid on the block. So I didn't expect to break into that three. On form, should I have done initially? Yeah, probably. Um, but in the end, Andy went his walkabout, and that gave me an opportunity to go and experience a World Cup, which was incredible in itself. And our first game was Brazil. Opened the World Cup. It doesn't come much better than that, other than beating Brazil in the World Cup final, really. And we weren't capable of that. So
Nearly.
yeah,
Obviously, in Scotland are at their closest really right now to
yeah,
reach a World Cup again since '98, to be honest.
yeah.
So can you sum up, the emotions and just everything, the atmosphere of being involved in a World Cup camp?
Um, how can you sum that up? I think that's that's the epitome of success for a football player. I think is to be part of a group of players and staff, and we got on very well with the staff at Scotland. Going back to Craig Brown, and yeah, I think you walk onto the Stade de Paris, and you've got your kilt on, and your family are watching you from wherever they are in the world. At the time I'd booked a family holiday, and my 2 young children were in Menorca somewhere, I think, watching their dad in France. So yeah, I just think it's the top end of where you want to go in your football career.
So you return from, that amazing experience, and
Mm.
everything's changed at Celtic. Obviously,
Yeah.
Dr. was in the door, a rather left field appointment, to be honest, and there was a lot of upheaval at that time. So what was your kind of relationship with him? Where the club were really going at that time?
Yeah, no, my relationship I mean, all of our relationships with Joseph was quite excellent, to be honest, and it may have been left field in respect of a known quantity
Yes.
to the Celtic supporters, and some other people in other forms, but as far as the personality goes, he was a top person, and yeah, I think I was disappointed that we didn't at least win something for him. It was that was the shame really for Joseph, because his coaching was good. We enjoyed doing the work with him, and it just didn't go right. We didn't see it through, and I don't think that was Joseph's fault. I think that was probably the fact that the again, when new managers come into clubs, and Tommy had an amazing year before Vim. Vim then recruited some players that added to the dressing room. Joseph, to be fair, brought a couple of great ones in. I just think the turmoil initially didn't help us that season,
Yeah,
and it was hard to claw it back.
absolutely. And that almost unsmoothness kind of continues. Obviously, John
Yeah.
Barnes had a stint, Kenny had a stint as well, Kenny Dalglish. Do you think perhaps under Barnes and Dalglish, they would have perhaps known you from your time in England? Do you think they maybe had some sort of preconception, about you, your ability?
Um, I don't know the answer to that. I really can't answer that. You'd have to ask them. You'd hope not, but if I look back, maybe that was the case. But it's still my responsibility then as a goalkeeper to prove to any manager that you play under that you're good enough to be his first choice. And to be fair, I think that the first season of John's, I played the majority of the games. Had a kind of fallout after John left, and Kenny left me out. But then he always promised me, he said, "You'll get a chance back to get back in the team," and I did. And then things changed again, as we know. Yeah, it was a strange period. I think and I've kind of been critical of John in the past, and but I think it was a really big ask for a rookie manager to come in and understand management at that level of football club, and be successful. And I think, yeah, that's why it didn't work. And again, you look back at some of the performances we had under John early in that season, and I think the 7-0 home defeat of Aberdeen, we were exceptional in that game. So yeah, John at the time, it just didn't work, and that's football.
Yeah, absolutely. And then for the club kind of perspective, things
Mm,
ultimately smoothed out when Martin came
yeah,
in. But for you, perhaps not so much, for your own personal, stance in your
yeah,
position.
yeah,
Did you know from the outset, you've touched on obviously already that
yeah,
there's always linking to goalkeepers, and to be honest, there still is really at Celtic. So did
yeah,
you know though from the outset he maybe didn't quite fancy you?
yeah. I don't tell this story to many people, but I'll tell you the story. So, Terry Jenner was the goalkeeping coach, and I had a decorator called Jim McLean, and I think he still decorates in and around East Kilbride, Newton Meds nowadays. And Terry clearly didn't realise that Jim knew me really well. We used to go and play golf, Jim and I, now and then. And Jim was decorating a house that I had, and he came around and he goes, "Oh, I was doing Terry's place up near Thornton Hall." He said, "Yeah, he made a strange comment." I said, "Oh, what was that?" He said, "Well, I asked him about the goalkeepers, and obviously he didn't know that I knew you." He says, "Yeah." He says, and Terry apparently said to Jim, "We haven't really got a number one at the moment." So I don't think I've even told Terry that story, and I love Terry Jano to death. I think he's a wonderful guy. But yeah, so I had a pretty early heads up that the management probably didn't believe in my ability. So yeah,
What
that made it difficult.
You know, you kind of said that earlier on as well. You did actually start under Martin, and you started pretty all right.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
did you almost get a sense of false belief, perhaps, that everything was kind of going well?
Um, yeah, and yes and no, because we kept getting linked with goalkeepers, and I'm led to believe. I mentioned Mark Bozic's name. I'm led to believe that Martin had journeyed down to see him in somewhere in the UK, and hadn't quite got on that well with Mark. I'm not sure, or didn't see him as the right sort of fit. And then obviously we signed Big Rab Douglas, and like Rab's a friend to this day, and we were roommates, and I knew at some point he was going to get an opportunity. And I remember going into when Martin had made the decision to leave me out of one of the league games, and going into his office, and he did. Martin turned around to me, he said, "Look, I really like your personality." He said, "It's just that your goalkeeping does give me the heebie-jeebies," which is quite amusing in itself. But he said, "But I'm prepared to offer you a new contract." Now, having been through a fair amount of turmoil, and at the time, I was still in the first team, and knowing what Martin was going to bring to the football club, I felt at the time that, despite the fact that he didn't fancy me as the first choice, I wanted to be part of what he was about to build. Because I'd known success 2 or 3 years prior to that with Vim. I knew how massive this football club was, and I knew what a top manager would bring to the football club, and he did that. So we won. We win the treble, and I've got the medals to that treble. I've got the shirts to that treble. I played in the league, I played in the Scottish Cup, and I played in the League Cup final. So it can, as much as he might not have wholly believed in me, I played a part that year.
Yeah, absolutely did. Jonathan, can I just ask you one more thing? Can you move your thumb? You can't
There's
see
my thumb. Yeah.
There we go, perfect.
That was the thumb that stopped 10, wasn't it?
I was just going to say that.
So,
For me. So, you talk about obviously being a part of that treble winning side, and perhaps of late Celtic have maybe made it look a bit easy, but it was far from that. And it did take both yourself and Rab to be a real part of that.
Yeah, they may have made it look easy even of late, but it's not. Okay, it is not. It's having the inner strength as a group of players to grind out win after win after win, and it is very, very difficult. It was one of the things, Amy, that annoyed me when I came back down to the UK, was because there was that expectation level as a Celtic player, win, 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 and then I remember coming down to Preston and we win 2, and everyone would kind of take their foot off the gas. Oh, we've won 2. Doesn't matter if we lose the next one. And I used to get quite annoyed about it, and I still do to this day. If you want to be winners, you've got to have you've got to have that belief, and you've got to have the courage to try and win every single game. And to do that, you have to physically go through the pain barrier, especially if you're an outfield player. As a goalkeeper, we'll call it mental agility. It's called, it's being switched on for 90 minutes, game after game after game. As a player, it's physically absolutely screwing the nut for 94, 95 minutes. It's not easy. So whatever people might think over the period of the trebles that Celtic win, it's not. It's really difficult.
You obviously, you touched upon there that move down to Preston. You leave Celtic, you leave behind that almost. Well, you don't personally leave behind that elite mentality. You carry that through, but everything does change because you're leaving a club like Celtic. So, how does that feel? The emotions from such a successful period in your career.
Again, in retrospect, and this is so easy to say, should I have left for my game? Yes, it was the right thing to do, because I then ended up playing another 55 games for Preston in the next 2 years, and getting myself back into the Scotland squad in 2003. But when I think back to the next 5 months that I missed out on, and I missed out on Seville, and I probably, I think, well, could I have done 10 years? Could I still be at the football club? There's a tinge of regret, but it was purely a footballing decision. And Martin at that point in my career, he gave me there was a couple of things that he took out of my decision making, and one of them was financial, because I was due some money as a loyalty payment from Celtic, and he took that out of the equation. He said, don't worry about that. He says, you've served this club over the last 6 years. You'll get that. Even, I was out of contract 5 months later. He said, just make a decision in respect of what you want to do for the next 2 or 3 years, because I can't guarantee you a long-term career at Celtic. So even though that was still quite hard to fathom, it was an amazing thing for a manager to say, and an amazing thing for a club to do as well, was to let me make that decision, and so I did, and it was a football one, and it was probably the right thing.
Yeah. Well, and it speaks volume of the amazing man that is Martin O'Neill.
Yeah.
Did kind of start a renaissance really in your career. So
Yeah.
perhaps it was a totally different ball game to obviously the intensity of Celtic. But how much did you just enjoy playing football again down at Deepdale?
Yeah, and that's enjoyment is the word, and I've gone into coaching now, and enjoyment is something that I impress on the goalkeepers that I work with, because there is such an amount of pressure. You still have to do it with a smile on your face, and I did. I came back down. I was linked up with Craig Brown, who had obviously shown faith in me a couple of times, and we did okay at Preston, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, and the 2.5 years wasn't wasted there. It was and is a really, really strongly led football club, and I remember the first time I walked into, a bit similar to walking into Glasgow Celtic. The first time I walked into Preston North End, the first guy I saw was Tom Finney. Now, he's one of the greatest wingers of all time, alongside the likes of Jinky and Sir Stanley Matthews, and Tom was probably in his 80s at the time, and he was still opening fan mail that was arriving at his beloved football club. And that's that kind of as a footballer walking into a football club, you then realise there's some history behind it, and the former players are a big part of that history.
And you mentioned it there, that you did make those, and you are still really in that coaching capacity. So were those the steps that you wanted to make into coaching?
Yeah, always.
Yeah.
I think I was, as a goalkeeper, you've got to be a pretty good coach anyway, Amy, because that's what you spend most of your time doing, coaching a back four, maybe a holding midfield player, maybe getting the wide men to tuck round. You do a lot of talking, so when you go into coaching, it's probably there's probably a lot in there anyway. And I've enjoyed. I'm just trying to think now. How old am I? 53. I've enjoyed best part of 17 years coaching now.
And on obviously of both sides, sorry, of the world. So there's one particular kind of role that I really want to touch upon.
Yeah.
How did you get that link up with Ian Ferguson? Because that's an odd thing to realise.
Gosh, Ian, right? Okay, so I was. I just left the Wellington Phoenix, who were in the A-League, and I'd worked with a goalkeeper called Danny Vukovic, really quite a talented boy, and he ended up in Belgium and has had a good career over there. So we were about to come back from New Zealand we always come back for about a month's holiday during June, July, to get the double summers, and I don't usually go to bed late. I'm usually early in bed, and for some reason I was up packing, and the phone went 12 o'clock at night. This was, and obviously in Perth it was 7 o'clock, and Fergie, who was ringing me, didn't realise we were 5 hours difference, and anyway, he picked the phone up to him, and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm sort of doing some local stuff at the moment in New Zealand." He said, "Well, do you fancy coming and being my goalkeeping coach over in Perth?" And I thought, "Fergie, are you serious?" He goes, No. He said, Danny, my goalkeeper, really keen on you. He said, "Don't worry about any of the differences that we may have had in the past." And we'd had a couple on the pitch, Fergie and I, and there was also a lad called Stuart Munro, was Fergie's number 2. We had a lad called Ian Gillan, who's from Aberdeen, and he's now out in Malaysia coaching. And there was 4 Scots coaching at this football club, and so it was an amazing environment to go into. But one of the things that Ian said, he was going through his A license at the time. He said that out of his coaching relationships, he wanted friendships, and it is an unlikely friendship, but that's definitely what we've got. and people might think that's strange to hear, but we had to work hard together to make sure that we were successful as a coaching group. And that year we got in the grand final as well. And we had Liam Miller, former Celtic player, and obviously has passed away in recent years. And my one of our first games was playing against Celtic in a pre-season friendly. It's incredible, really.
What a small world. Surely
Yeah.
in the day to day, you must have had jibes at each other. You can't keep your differences.
Yeah, there were jibes, but that's as far as it went. I think I had one little ding dong with Fergie on the bench, where he kept turning around to me and having a go about Danny. Funny enough, what's that goalkeeper doing? But he didn't put it quite as kindly. And in the end, I got fed up with it. I said, "Well, you picked him," and that was it. All kicked off at that point, and we were effing and blinding at each other. And then I think we just looked at each other, gave each other a hug, sat back down, and got on with it. That's how football works. But it was never a Celtic Rangers thing. It was just two passionate men that love football.
And talking about guys that love football, obviously when you come back over to the UK, you have decent stints under Tony Pulis at West Brom, Middlesbrough, and then you return to Preston under Alex Neil. So how much have you learnt from these roles, and now in the English game as well?
Oh, massive. 3 years under Tony. And bear in mind he was Premier League Manager of the Year, and we, he kept West Brom in the Premier League, and then our last full season we finished 10th, and I thought that was a remarkable achievement. A club like West Brom with limited resources, and then we had some rather wealthy owners take over, and we thought, right, we're gonna be able to invest heavily in the football club or in the playing side. It didn't happen, and you move on in football. And then I went to Middlesbrough with Tony, and that was another fantastic football club. And then I was literally about to leave to go to New Zealand. I think it was 2019, and I got a phone call from Peter Ridsdale, and he said, would you be keen on coming and talking to Alex Neil and I about being the goalkeeping coach at Preston? And and as a former player, to go back to that club, I thought was ideal, and also to learn off Alex. Alex had at the time done a tremendous job at Norwich. I didn't really know Alex at all. I knew he was feisty. I'd come up against him on the touchline, but always liked the way his teams had played football. And on that basis, I thought, right, I'm going to go and learn off somebody else. And that's, in your role as a coach, as a goalkeeping coach, or as an assistant coach, I think you have to learn off people like that to become better yourself and to challenge yourself. And that certainly happened under Tony and Alex.
And am I right in saying, obviously, I think you're over in Scotland right now, but are you based over in New Zealand again right now?
No, we've moved back. I think COVID's changed our world, Amy. As you we're all aware of it. And I've got 2 children here and my family, and it was probably the right time to come back. I'm national goalkeeping coach for New Zealand football, so. Just returned from Bahrain with a national trip with them, and due to go off to back out to the Middle East in the next 2 or 3 weeks, with them. So I've maintained strong links. I've got a house there, and I love the country, and I'd like to be able to spend 6 months there and 6 months here, but you have to be able to pay for that. Have to keep working.
Absolutely, you've got to put the hours in. So, you've had a remarkable career, worked under some remarkable managers and coaches as well. So, and obviously you're in that capacity yourself right now. So, as we look at the kind of broader sense of goalkeeping right now, what's the kind of style that you would implement and that you favour?
Or style of football?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I want my goalkeepers to stop the ball going in the back of the net, and if they can do that, Amy, that's a great start. Yeah, it's weird because I was, having been an outfield player, I felt that I was always quite capable of being able to play out from the back. It wasn't something of my era. Generally, I used to have to put the ball down from a goal kick and stick it 70 yards on top of a big centre forward. That's definitely changed. But I still think I think every goalkeeper has got to have that ability and be good with both feet. How do I want the game played personally? I like wingers. Okay, so I want to get the ball into my wide players, and I want to see them take a full back on, cross the ball, and I want to see a diving header at the near stick, or I want to see a big towering header at the far stick, or I want to see a cut back and someone smash it in the back of the net from the edge of the box. I love wingers. That's what I was kind of brought up on, and that's probably how I like to see the game played.
Well, you've just pitched your CV for Celtic. Stevie wasn't going anywhere anytime soon. He's been a remarkable servant for the club. But if the opportunity ever came around, would you join Celtic again?
In any capacity, of course you would. But I'm not strategic like that, Amy. If jobs come up and people deem me ready for that job, brilliant. But certainly not after anybody else's job at this moment in time.
Not at all. So, Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us. All the very best with your work with New Zealand still right now. But if there's a Celtic managerial job kicking around anytime soon,
no. Angie's gonna be the maestro there. Trust me.
I believe you there. He's certainly got us all buying into it right now.
Yeah.
So, Jonathan Gould, thank you so much for joining me on Soccer Supernova.
Thank you very much, Amy.